I'm Rob Lindsay from the Centre for Innovation and Education. Gary's here. Gary, say hello.
Hello, hello. I'm from the English Language Centre.
Lovely. And I'm just going to go to full screen. So that should be full screen now. And you can see that okay, Gary?
Yeah, fine.
Great. So as we've said, it's going to be an introductory session, and we're going to try and keep it as hands-on as possible. So it's really nice to have this many people join us for what is a starting of the near term. Got a couple of weeks still yet, but it's nice that everyone's going to brush up on this. And the reason that we think this is such an important time to be talking about generative AI is because it's the students that are going to be talking to us as academics and professional services staff about how they use it. So really, we do have this central support in CIE, IT services, the know-how team, the library team, support all over the university. But actually, you're probably, if you're teaching or admin, you're going to be the first line of support for students that ask you how to do certain things. And students are getting, a demand to learn these skills from their work, from their peers, from their courses. So there really is a need to meet that expectation that we ourselves as practitioners understand what we're talking about. And this session here is the first step in that. And you can watch it back. Don't worry if you don't follow along within the session. Gary's going to show you some simple things and some not so simple things. But it takes a bit of time to get used to this technology, and it's something that will help us in different ways, as we will demonstrate. So that's the introduction. We're going to set it up like this. So when it's hands-on, we anticipate it might go a bit more quiet as people in the background are, working away. Gary and I will try and just sort of talk through what we're doing or what Gary's doing, and we can take questions as we go. So any questions, please pop them in the chat at any time. But Gary, we'll start with an introduction and your understanding of what generative AI is.
Okay, so I think most of us probably heard of generative AI around November of 2022 when ChatGPT was released to the public. It had obviously been developed for many years before then, with many companies working on different models. We call the things that we use, the interfaces that we use, models. And when ChatGPT was first released to the public, it had one of the quickest uptakes of any software platform in history, really. And why it was so interesting is basically what these things do is they let you enter some instructions in natural language. You don't need any particular technical skill or anything to achieve results with these things. You enter an instruction, and it will try and formulate a response or some text to carry out your instruction. So you could ask it for very basic things, or you could ask it for much longer, more complicated things. When it first came about, it was really limited to text, but over time they've added more and more functionality to these models, and now they can make images, they can make tables, they can actually give you documents, they can code, they can successfully code quite complex things now, all manner of things. They can make high quality images that are sometimes indistinguishable from like photographs. They're very impressive. So these technologies have now spread out outside of OpenAI, who make ChatGPT, to Google. Facebook have them. There's certain other companies like Anthropic who have big successful models. And there are a lot of opportunities to use these things. These are available in free versions. I think every company offers a free version, which might not be the most up-to-date model, but they're all very, very functional, very usable. And you have a paid version where you get the latest and greatest kind of model that they offer as well. So yeah, they're very easy to access. Like I say, no technical knowledge required, and they're very helpful for both teachers and students in many parts of the job. But it all comes down to assessing the best use cases for them, in my opinion.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Gary. And I think this image here represents really the journey of the quality of the content and material that is produced through these platforms. And obviously on the 2010s on the left, we're looking at, a quite shrewdly drawn horse. This is from a famous meme that we'll sort of accredit in the slides. But we're looking at that advancement, time moving from left to right here towards the much sharper, clearer definition of what a horse could be. And I'm sure if you put something like this into a model, a ChatGPT or a generative AI model, and asked it to come up with something similar, it would be able to do so. And the purpose of this image really is just showing that actually the progression has been quite considerable. So, 2 years ago, we were talking about them, we were talking about the limits of this technology, what they can't do, what they do okay. We're still talking about those areas and things that they don't do very well because they haven't ironed them out. But the point is, it looks like they will eventually get to a level in terms of intelligence that is beyond what we're seeing right now. And that's represented quite well in this chart here, which demonstrates the attainment or the grades that have been scored through an automated attempt at these essays or assessments using generative AI tools. And the one that sort of really stands out to me is the bar exam, the uniform bar exam, which was taken by ChatGPT 3.5. And that model is the lighter green model on the left, where in the first instance, it scored in the 10th percentile, so quite low down. And then when they upgraded the model to GPT-4, so they've refined what it is to actually build around this technology and they've made it better, it's now scored in the 90th percentile. So that shows a huge improvement in that output for assessment in what it's being assessed to do. So if you imagine the assessments we're setting our students now and thinking, well, it's okay, you know, they're not going to score too highly based on what they're going to get back from today's technology. This technology, following the sort of law of computing, will get better and better, and it will score higher unless we look at how we can consider our assessment design, consider how we teach with these tools and technologies. And we've got some excellent sessions this week delivered by my colleague Sam. He will be looking at assessment design. So if you're worried about that, come along to that one and he will look at how we can sort of future-proof those to a degree. And what we really want to do is get students using these technologies, because employers are asking for these skills, students are asking for these skills. We ourselves want to be using them as well. It's an efficient all-round technology that can be used across a whole host of purposes in education, administration and beyond. And we saw that in Heather and Brian's chat earlier in their presentation, about the different types and ways that these can be used. Some of which we're learning from students themselves. So we sit down and ask them how they use it and they tell us, and that was an excellent piece of research presented. So again, we've just sort of covered the basic multi-purpose use of the tools, and you might be thinking, oh, well, you know, what does that actually mean? We'll go through that in a minute when we have a little hands-on go with some of them, and Gary's going to lead us through that. But we just thought, as we're doing this, you know, pop in the chat how you've been using it, if you have been using it, you know, have you seen benefits, what are the limitations? We really want to hear from you and feedback from that experience into our teaching and our learning, and spread that across the institution. So feel free to post that now. But in terms of the sort of core areas that we've seen, it's, you know, planning research activities, structuring content, implementing and teacher and learning, building. There's a lot of creative uses of these technologies, which we'll show you. And that filters down into the content creation and support for administration. And we will go very strongly into the ethics this week as well. So these tools were not built without ethical consideration and concern. They scraped the internet, really. That's what they did. That was the data that Gary talked about. They took written content online and video and media that they didn't have permission to do so, and have built up these models from that. So there's a lot of concern about how they've been built and the ethical considerations around that. And we've got a dedicated slide to that. But I strongly recommend the ethics session, which will really go into that, and the environmental cost of them that is using up quite a lot of power, quite a lot of energy. It's something that factors into this whole conversation. So we'll touch on that shortly. But I'll get the chat up just to sort of go along with that as well. But I think for now, what we're going to do is get everyone sort of hands-on, if that's okay. So Gary, I'll stop sharing my screen and we'll look at some practical examples and use cases of these tools. And what we're going to ask you to do is at home, have a little go with them. You know, you can do it in the background or just watch us do it, and we'll see how you get on in the chat as well. So Gary, I'll stop talking for a little bit.
Excellent. Okay. Thank you, Ron. Can you see my screen? You can. Fantastic. Okay. So we all at the university, we all have access to Microsoft Edge, which is an internet browser. It's on, I think it's on every university laptop and machine around the campus. And using Edge, we can actually access GPT-4, which Rob was just showing the stats of, which had been so successful in all of those tests, without having to pay for it, which is very nice. I'll just show the actual paid products first of all. They all look very, very, very similar. So ChatGPT, you can see here, has a very, very clean interface. You just have a text box at the bottom. You can attach a file if you like. You can give it your instruction. The Google equivalent is Gemini, and you can see the same sort of thing. You have a text box, you can add a file, you can actually speak to Gemini as well. And the other major one is a product called Claude by a French company called Anthropic. And exactly the same thing. You can see how simple all of these interfaces are. You have a text box and you can give your instruction. But what we're going to have a look at today is the free version that we have via the university, which is Microsoft's Copilot. Now, where it's sort of prudent for us to use Copilot is it has this commercial data protection. So as we're using it through the university, it makes sense for us to try and use something where our data that we're inputting into the model does not forward into future training data for the model. So to open it, we just have this button at the top. You can see this, we have Copilot if we hover over it, and it opens a side panel at the side of the screen. And once again, we have our box at the bottom. It says, ask me anything, and it literally means ask me anything. Copilot is connected to the internet, where some of the models are not. So Copilot can go out, find some information online, obviously things that aren't behind a paywall, and integrate that into its responses. And it will tell you where it got the information from as well. We can do various things. We can add an image, we can add a screenshot, we can upload a file, and we can use the microphone to speak our prompt into the model. Okay. At the top here, we have two tabs. We have chat and we have compose. Okay, so chat is where you can just talk to it generally. But if you're trying to make it produce a specific type of writing, you can go to compose. And we see here that we have, just get rid of what I was doing before. We have different kind of tones that we can ask it to take. So we have professional, casual, enthusiastic, informational, funny, and succinct. And then we can also tell it what we're looking to create, be it a paragraph, an email, a bulleted list, a post for LinkedIn, a summary of some information, or a report. We can choose the length, and then we can ask it to generate the draft, which it will in this box below here. So it's a really easy thing to open. You've always got it available to you in Copilot via this little button here. There's actually another way to get to it. I'm just going to search for anything. I'm going to search for tree surgery. And it takes us to our normal sort of Bing search inside of Edge. But what's very easy to miss is the second tab in the search. This is our normal search results that we have here. But the second tab is Copilot. So if we click on Copilot, it will open up the Copilot interface here. Sorry. And you can see it's starting to generate text based on just the search term that I gave it. Now, I might decide that I want to do something completely different. I can just hit the new topic button and it will take me back to the start. So this is a way where we have like a kind of full screen interface. It's exactly the same model as if we open it up at the side of the screen, but we have the whole of the screen to work in this conversation. And it being a conversation is probably the most important thing to realize about these products. You're not just asking for something in isolation. When it gives you the response, you can then assess the response and ask it to make improvements or changes to the response. Because at the start, it can be a little difficult writing prompts and being very complete in what you want. So you'll find that the response is probably not exactly to your needs, so you can then ask it to make some changes. You can ask it to change the tone, the length, the content. You can ask it to remove a specific thing that you didn't like or add something that it didn't include. And you work with it in a conversational format to gradually try and get to what you want. Okay, so I'm going to just do a very quick demonstration of the types of things it can do. So the first thing is going to be something really, really sort of universal. I'm going to ask it to make a recipe. So I've just pasted a prompt in here, and it says generate a recipe from this list of ingredients. Then we have a list of ingredients, and all we have to do is hit the submit button. Now I could have asked it for any specific things that I wanted it to do, or I've given it free rein really just to use the list of ingredients, and we can see that it's decided to make a chicken and vegetable pot pie. It's given me the list of ingredients, and then it's given me, or it's giving me full instructions on how to make this this particular meal. So it will continue to. I even added in some nice little emojis for me there. So it will continue until it's finished the response, and then you can choose to continue the conversation, or you can use one of these kind of follow-up questions that it will suggest for you at the bottom of the response. So in this case, you can ask it for a vegetarian version, or ask what side dishes go with it. So if I was to click on that, it would again just continue to provide you with what you've asked for. So this is almost like the most basic way of using these things. You give a text prompt, but you get a text response. Next thing up from this really would be to use like a multimodal approach, which would be to use audio or image or even video with some of these products. So once my vegetarian pie has finished, the recipe's finished being written, I'm going to take an image from a document that I have, and I'm going to paste in the image into the chat. I'll make a new chat because this is a different dish that we're going to be looking at. So you can see it's made a thumbnail of the picture of the food that I've included. And I'm going to ask it to look at the image. I don't have to ask it to look, but I'm going to ask it to give me a recipe for this dish. And what this should show is the computer, the model has an ability to look at the image, try and divine what it's looking at, and then act upon the prompt afterwards. So in this case, it looks like we have a kind of chicken roast dinner with some gravy. And yeah, it seems to have done pretty well. It's identified that it's a roast chicken dinner with potatoes, carrots, and green vegetables. And it has given us a recipe, which is quite impressive. It's actually managed to get it quite right. We did try this morning with another group, and we had slightly less successful results. I think it misidentified the chicken as fish this morning, but maybe it's getting a little bit better as the day goes on.
But actually, Gary, just to jump in there, that's exactly where a point of bias may come about in these systems, and that they are interpreting what they think is, you know, an item or an object or a person. And actually what the data is that tells it that is this type of whatever may be incomplete. It might be built on, you know, wrong data. And actually it becomes a case of that's not fish, but it thinks it's fish. It's because it's got the characteristics of something that stereotypically may be. So it's just being aware that these images, you know, especially with the images at the minute, the technology is not there yet, is it, in terms of being able to identification and areas around that?
Yeah, absolutely. And it will still make, you know, all manner of mistakes if you give it something technical to look at. And we had a look at some drawings that a draftsman had given us to see how that could play out, and it was able to identify the type of diagram and the main components, and it was even able to suggest what type of machine the diagram was of. But the finer details, it had absolutely no idea at all. So although it's impressive and it's getting better, it's still got a fair way to go. Yeah, for sure.
And if I could just pick up Natalie's comment in the chat as well about prompting, and Natalie said that rubbish in, rubbish out, which is very much the case with these. And prompting is the idea that you're putting in information to request more information back, that Gary's just done there. And the prompting really is where we're developing skills in this area in users to be able to get what we want out of it. So Gary might ask it for a quick recipe, and it might just come back with a recipe just related to the image, but not the image itself. Whereas if he says, I would like exactly what this recipe is, I want the ingredients noted by weight and size and cost, he would then get a lot more information from that. So that's a great point, Natalie.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I think there's with prompting, you seem to get generally better and better over time. I found at first one of the more useful tips that I read after starting to use these things was ask it to improve your prompts. Like, write your prompt and then ask it to improve it, and see how it rewrites it, and see how it gives itself a role in many cases, or the type of instructions it would give itself, and then let that inform your writing of prompts as you continue to use the platform. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, we'll just go on to another thing it can do, show it doing something a little bit more detailed. So we have a bigger prompt here, a slightly longer prompt. We're going to ask it for a weekly food schedule, and then we have a fair amount of caveats in here and requests. So this is going to be quite a detailed response, I imagine. So we have a bulleted list, and immediately it starts to take into account our demands and produce a weekly meal plan. Now, with anything that these things ever produce for you, you have to be able to review them, and I think that's one of the most important kind of things to impress on our students as well. Is if you're not confident enough to review what it's giving you, then you shouldn't be using it. If you don't have enough knowledge of the area to confidently assess the responses, then really you have no business using it at all. So we'd have to go through and make sure, if we did have very specific dietary requirements, we'd have to make sure it adhered to what we've given it. But as you can see, it's had a fair go at it, and if we were able to take our time and go through it, we might find that it's a relatively sort of plausible meal plan for the week. Rob, do you want to come in at all?
Sorry, what was that going? I was just picking up a query there.
Should we go to some practice, or should we go through any more examples, do you think?
No, I think, yeah, another example if you've got one. And if people at home are using this just to see what they're getting back from it, that'd be really interesting as well. So are people sort of trying out the images? I think if we can go, because we've gone from the recipe and the image, if we talk about the handwritten notes idea, is that okay, Gary?
Yeah, sure.
You're
So
happy to demonstrate that, yeah.
handwritten, have we got an example of that? Let's have a look.
Not in the folder, but just for the people at home. So because you can access this on your phone as well, if you walk past something or you've written something that is in text form, and this is the idea that it can create multimodal learning resources. Let's say, for example, you've written up your notes in a meeting, or you've written notes in a meeting and you want to transcribe them, but you don't want to type them up. And you've got the app open at phone, or sorry, you've got your phone at home. Take a picture of anything that you've written or find an example on the internet. And Gary will show you how to upload an image and then get the information out that in text form. And this is really useful, for example, when you have written something and you want to get it off the paper, but into a digital form, perhaps you've got to circulate it with colleagues. It's just going to save you that typing up time. And I think that's a really useful use case in teaching, learning, and admin.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's this is something we've had a fair bit of success with. I've just found this note on just via Google, just Googling handwritten notes. And we can see that it's legible, it's possible to read it, but it's not the easiest handwriting in the world to interpret. So let's see how it does. So I've pasted, very easy, any image you ever have, you can just paste into the prompt box for these things. So I'm just going to ask it, but basically, what is this note about? And we'll see if it manages to read this handwriting. Okay, so it's done an excellent job of this. It's managed to identify the service that this is advertising, and it's managed to identify the content, and that, in fact, it's somehow managed to identify that the handwriting looks like it was done by a human, but it actually wasn't as part of this service. So yeah, very, very, very impressive. We've found student work, even with lots of corrections and bits of crossing out and stuff like that. It's managed to do a really, really good job with. I'm not sure how it works with other languages. I don't think we've tested that, but with English, it does an excellent job of identifying handwriting, and it will even like format your notes for you, or reformat your notes if you have a couple of pages of notes and you want them condensed or put into Markdown or anything like that, so you can put them into your note-taking program or software. It's a real time saver. Yeah, so very, very interesting use for it.
Yeah,
as well.
and we've got a session tomorrow morning on accessibility that Steve Summers is leading with Ben and Kat, who I can see Steve's in this meeting. So they'll be looking at use cases like this that are really beneficial for that idea that it can be an assistive technology. So, for example, it's taken a handwritten note, it's converted it to text. In this instance, it's just summarizing, but we can get it to go verbatim as well. And then actually you can have that read out to you as well, Gary, if you want to just show how that happens.
Do I have to be sharing my audio?
No, yeah,
I'm not
if you
sure.
just show the button, don't worry about actually playing it. Just that, so it's just next to the download option and the responses just above.
Yeah. Okay.
That's it.
Yeah. Yes, we can read it aloud. And I think you get a choice of a couple of voices and things. These little controls are actually really, really useful in Copilot. You can just copy the text to the clipboard, or you can export anything you ever make directly out to a Word document, a PDF, or a plain text file as well. So it's really it doesn't. I don't think because the institution's privacy settings, I don't think you can go back to your prior conversations. Is that right, Rob?
Yes, I don't think I've seen that happen. I don't know if it saves it. If you click on the Copilot button, just try that for a second. But yeah, I can't remember seeing a chat history in this.
Yeah, I don't think since we turned the privacy thing on, I think that's gotten rid of the history. I think so. You do have to be quite disciplined, and if you do manage to kind of get to produce something that you want to keep or you would like to save, be careful to save it in the moment rather than thinking you're going to be able to go back to it because you may not be able to.
Yeah, there's a good question about the limit of responses being limited to 30. I think it's probably because after 30 it starts to lose its way a bit, but I'm not certain of that.
Yeah, I think so. In all of these things, very, very long conversations, it does start to struggle with context over time. Even with the paid versions of ChatGPT and Gemini, they have a longer sort of context window. But the further you go through, especially if you're uploading long documents, the more it will start to forget the start of the conversation over time. So yeah, I think it's probably limited it to 30 for that reason. But 30 is quite a lot of messages. You can get quite a lot done in 30 responses, I think, generally.
Yeah, and you could also get creative. So if you wanted to export your 30 questions, turn it into a document, you could then upload that as a document, and that would be question one. You know, there's just ways around this sort of technology. Natalie mentions that the loss of history is, you know, in ChatGPT, yes, you do have things kept for you locally. I think it is the data issue with Microsoft saying, right, we will not store anything on our servers whatsoever. We're just going to delete it. We'll definitely look into the case. I've looked and I can't find my history anywhere. And I did used to be able to see it. So I think that might be with an update. ChatGPT, people are very keen to use that as their model. I mean, it is my preferred model for certain things. But again, you can turn your data security off with that. The reason that we are talking about Edge and Copilot today in a majority is because we are secure within the institution in terms of the data protection. ChatGPT outweighs Copilot in a number of areas, but there's, you know, we can look at that later in the week where we will go into ChatGPT and how we can use that in different ways. There are ways to turn off your data sharing there as well, but it's not institutionally robust as something like this where we have the service agreement with Microsoft.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Just show, maybe try one more thing. Oh, in fact, no, should we go for some practice run?
Yeah, and the model that it uses is GPT-4, and I think it's probably GPT-4 Omni. It's the latest model. It just is slightly more limited in the way that it's basically built around that model.
Yeah, absolutely. And also it uses, I think it's the DALL-E 3 as well for images as
Yeah,
well. So
you could image creation if you want to show that as well, Gary. We'll sort of show that off in time.
okay. Do you want to give me something you'd like to see?
An image of a wind turbine on land in a hurricane. Not sure how you draw a hurricane, but let's see what generative AI says. Amy, it's interesting to hear that, you know, Copilot can't cope with all handwriting. I found that myself as well. I know doctors are famed for their writing, so I'd love to see the sort of medical analysis of longer words, more complicated words. Again, data issues there. I don't imagine doctors will be using this for a long time until there's any sort of security guaranteed around what is put into it. There we are. I mean, oh yeah, so this is just the generating image. But yeah, if you've got it open, there we are. That's not a bad effort. And you'll note that generative AI images have that sort of generative AI look, and they really are infiltrating, you know, marketing, media, multimedia. You'll see more and more of these coming round. The ethical issues around that is that it will be using artists' work as inspiration, and those artists have never really been rewarded or compensated or credited or even accredited in any way. So there's a big sort of ethical conversation around the use of generative AI content in the creative industries, and a real fear around that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, there is a very sort of generic look to a lot of them, but just like with the text, you can continue the images as a conversation. You can ask for gradual sort of improvements or changes. But it's still, they still struggle with a lot of things. They do struggle with text because of this the system that they use to generate the images. They're really quite poor with text. They've got a lot better with faces and hands. They're absolutely awful with hands
Yeah.
at the start.
We've got a good question there from Dean, who's delivering a brilliant session on Friday on research and AI. So if you're looking to research and use literature reviews with AI, go to that at 10 o'clock. But Dean's question is, how good GPT is at improving prompts, self-improvement? And I think actually it's very good in certain ways. Gary, do you want to do you want to talk through that? And I'll try and find you my example prompt that people can use to improve their own prompting.
Yeah, I mean, I think the way it deals with processing the prompts is to try and work out what is behind your request a lot of the time. So whenever you ask it to improve the prompts, it tends to break it down into almost like a bulleted list of requests, so it can be a lot clearer for itself, and it will generally look at the role, the tone, the actual request, and try and process it in a really logical way. So having a prompt, or just generally getting into the habit of asking it to improve the prompts that you give it, does tend to lead to improved results, which is useful. In ChatGPT, if you create like images and things like that, it doesn't actually build the image from your prompt. It will use your prompt to write a better prompt and then generate the image from that prompt. And you can actually see those prompts. You could just check on a little box, which is an eye, once you've generated an image in ChatGPT, and then you can read how it's prompted itself. So you can kind of get a little better over time with generating images. There's probably a custom GPT for improving prompts as well. And yeah, custom GPTs are something that now all of the products have started to use. So ChatGPT and Gemini has things like, they're called gems in Gemini. So you have these specific tuned models. So you can make them yourself, or you can use ones that other people have made. So this one, for example, is a writing editor, and it says it will elevate your writing, get clear constructive feedback from grammar to structure. So it's like a version of the model that is really designed only to perform one specific task, or task in one area. And these are very interesting. It's like in ChatGPT, you have these as well. In Claude, they're generally presented like a kind of shop where you choose your category. And there are actually in ChatGPT, let's have a look. You actually have some quite interesting categories for people around the university. You have the writing category, where you see lots of quite useless things like AI humanizer that really doesn't work at all. But there are like research and analysis ones, which are quite interesting. So you have Scholar GPT, SciSpace, Consensus. So some of the other big AI platforms and services. Whereas ChatGPT itself is very, very poor at providing references. SciSpace and Consensus have access to lots of big open databases where you can ask questions and get responses connected to real papers, which doesn't really happen with the base model of ChatGPT. So yeah, there's another interesting thing to explore, is not just the base model, which we can all access, but to have a look at as well at these GPTs, they call them. They could probably find a better name, but have a look at these tuned models that let you try and perform one specific task in a bit more detail.
Yeah, and we'll cover that on Thursday at 10 o'clock, Gary and I. So if you're interested in setting up your own model around your own teaching, learning, or anything like that, come along to that session at 10. We can talk you through that in detail.
Okay, Rob, should we see if people can get to grips with Copilot?
Yeah.
Okay, let me stop sharing. Okay, everyone. So if you can, if you'd like to test Copilot now, you can open Edge and you can access it via one of the two ways that we just saw, either via the button in the top right or just via the second tab in the search results. And be as creative as you like. You know, there's many, well, there's an almost infinite amount of things you could ask it to do, from the very generic things that we looked at, like the recipes and things like that. Think about asking it to provide you with tables or plans or anything like that, even emails. Ask it to produce you an email. Try and be as detailed as you can with the prompt and see what kind of results you get. And importantly, if you don't like the results, don't just assume that it's incapable of giving you what you want, but try and converse with it and ask it to improve what it's given you already.
Yeah, and we'd love if anyone wants to come on and just sort of let us know how you're getting on audio or just in the chat, please do so, and we'll just keep answering the questions as we go through this bit. So Regina's asked how to save results from Copilot. I suppose now would be just to export them, Gary. Is that right?
Yeah, just use the little down arrow at the bottom of the response, and that will let you save it out to a Word or a PDF or a text file. In the Google one in Gemini, it will let you send it out to Google Docs or directly to a Gmail message. So yeah, just be aware again with the Copilot that if you close it, you've probably lost it. So remember to export it if you get something useful.
Yeah, and Ewan's asked if has anyone updated to Windows 11 as there's a dedicated Copilot button? And yes, I have, Ewan. I'm yet to see the advantage of it really on the license that we have at the university. What you can do is engage with PDFs in a nice way, and I need to test that off the browser. But you can do it on browser just by navigating to the PDF that you want to engage with. So I'll just demonstrate that quickly while everyone's in the background trying. So I'll go for something, let's go for something fun like the university strategy. Who doesn't love a bit of that on a Monday in September? So what you'll see here is I've got my Edge browser open. I've gone to the strategy page. And can you see that okay, Gary? Is that working?
I don't think I can yet.
No, I might have to do it again. Screen 2. How's that?
Yeah, perfect.
So I'm at the strategy page document. So this can be any sort of PDF. And what you're able to do is generate a page summary. So if you go to an article or a journal blog or something similar, or you'd like your students to do so, they can do that. And what I do there is I'll click generate page summary. And what it should do is have a little look across, read through our strategic ambitions strategy document, and give me a summary of that. And what I can then do is engage with the PDF or with the web page and tease out further questions. So one thing I could do is ask it to give me a quiz on this. So I might say, give me a 5-question quiz on this. And so obviously, if you're looking at learning and teaching resources, if you're learning, you can ask it to test you. If you're teaching, perhaps you want to develop some resources to then share with the students. This is a nice way of doing it. Obviously, you're going to check through the answers and everything that it's given you. So I'm not going to try and answer these live, but I'm going to ask it to say, give me feedback for each question, incorrect, incorrect. And then what I can do is perhaps develop something and then add it to Canvas in the VLE there, or get students perhaps to go away. So it looks like it's not managed to do that. So I would reword my prompt there if I wanted it to do so and get it to have a better look. The Copilot button on the Windows browser is on my other screen, but that again doesn't really make much difference to what I've been trying it out with so far, Gary. I don't know if you've had any better luck with it, but
not really. I found like it's quite useful for asking how to do stuff in Windows. If you need to know where something is in Windows or how to change something, it's quite good at that. But apart from that, I don't think it's enormously helpful. No.
Yeah, and what it will do is eventually, if you had the more premium version, it can remember the sort of things you've done on your computer before. And that's when we're really getting into that data side of things again. We don't have this version running yet, so don't worry. But let's say you answered an email yesterday, you could talk to Copilot and say, who did I write that email to yesterday? Can you bring that up along with the relevant documents? And can you add a calendar invite to my next meeting with that person? And it's that automation, the idea that this is a technology that will have access to your apps. Again, we're not probably going to go down that route, luckily, because it just seems to open up too much knowledge around data privacy and information at the university that we don't want to share with it. We've just got this basic version that integrates with the web browser. I think it is on Windows 11 just for those that have taken out, the further licensing. Yeah, there's questions about the policy around the use of this, which is really, really interesting, Maria. Maria and I work very closely looking at different areas of AI use, and we're going to have some great use cases down the line. But the policy documents that we'll be looking for, there'll be a session from Claire from CIE on Thursday around, can we make academic policy fit for purpose? Because what we found is that when we do try and make policy around this, as we have to, it's a very tough job with different departments, different colleagues, different students having different demands. Satisfying all of that within one document that covers everything coherently has been a sort of ongoing issue. The research, yeah, it's another area for discussion. Thanks for posting these links, Natalie. We can share these after. And my colleague David as well has written a really useful generative AI course, on-demand course, which is free to all staff on Canvas. So I'll put a link to that in there. You might find that course interesting because we update that as much as possible. And that is, study at your own pace, self-progression documents and resources linking to the sort of policy frameworks that we're trying to develop and various areas that we're looking into. So I'm aware that we've had a little play. How have people found that in the background? Are people experimenting with it? Have they had any good use cases from that? We asked how people were using it earlier on, so I'll just scroll back up to that and see if there's anything we can elaborate on there. Some people have used it to refine and develop writing advert text. Ewan, I don't know if you want to touch on that in the chat, just to explain how you've done that. And Anna would like to look at, I can't say that word, it's too late in the day, formative tutor feedback and compare it to student results and performance. So these are more advanced uses of the technology that we're really interested in and seeing how far they go. And we had colleagues earlier asking, am I able to mark with this? And actually, that's an area that's very contentious, because what we may end up with, and this is always the running joke, is, AI submitted work being marked by AI tutors. And obviously that's not what we're going to have, but it's something that we're sort of gearing towards. But there is definitely discussion to be had around where this technology sits within the learning and teaching process. So I recommend coming on to the policy discussion. That will sit under ethics, the ChatGPTs. The whole week will give you an outline of these different uses for the tools. And I'm just sort of scanning the chat. So thank you for feeding into that. We've got you in sections from role description and Copilot. Yeah, that's a really useful use case of this. So if you imagine you're condensing information down into a more concise piece of text, that's a very good use case for it from staff. Students would probably not be able to do that because it would come under paraphrasing, which, unless they have the support plan in place to enable them to do that, would count as passing off work that wasn't their own, which is a really interesting area, because if I've written a long piece of work and it's all mine, but I want to rewrite it slightly, where's the line that we draw between acceptable use and unacceptable use? And that's another part of something that CIE, with many colleagues across the university, have been trying to sort of mediate on and at least guide. And what you'll find is this web page here, which I'll put in the chat, lists all of our resources around that. And that document will be the sort of guidance on the use case of it. Always trying to update that, always trying to factor that into our work. And because the technology is moving at such a speed that actually by the time we've written and got this signed off, some of the use cases are out of date and some new ones have come in, and actually we need to start again. So it's an ongoing process, but this web page here will give you a lot of information if you're looking at different areas. One thing that we're hearing from employers is that there's a lot of students using it to write application letters, and companies are now looking at, they're rereading similar tone and similar style application letters. So the application process needs to change, because actually it can draft you. If I take that summarized job description, feed it in, give it my CV and get it to align, it does that very well. Alignment is something that it does quite well. If you have a strategy you want to align your working to, you can do that by feeding both in and uploading the file, as Gary showed earlier. And David's just posted that Gen AI group again, which, yeah, the on-demand is a brilliant course as well. Any more questions you want to pick up, Gary, in the chat? Just reading through those.
There's some good use cases there. Someone, Moira, saying they've used Copilot to summarize document, rewrite notes into the form of proposal and a rubric for assessment. Very, very interesting. Let's see what else we have. I can take sections from role description, use Copilot to reduce it to a 2-paragraph length advert text. Yeah, these are really good uses of it as well. These are things it's particularly good at, like just finding what is redundant in text and trying to remove it. If you're struggling to reduce the length of something, it's pretty good at that. Just going back to the feedback that we were talking before, I've tried this extensively. I don't think it's quite there yet. Even putting in rubrics and assessment briefs and everything, it's really very, very bland in what it produces, to the point where I think most students would spot that it's been produced by AI.
Yeah.
Yeah,
there's a document around the academic integrity process, which we've termed on the use of misuse of generative AI, sorry. And if you read through that, that will give you an idea of the sort of terminology that you might encounter when you read documents produced through this. So once you've engaged with it quite a bit, you start to pick up on those. But the anticipation is that as it develops, it will, refine that and not be quite so formulaic in those ways. The AI humanizer that Gary showed earlier, it was a sort of earlier tool that tries to make it sound human, fails miserably because it thinks that humans are full of mistakes, and we are to a degree, but not in the way that it sort of repurposes, accurate work to have errors to then be cleared as non-AI written. So yeah, a lot of issues and discussion around that. Is there anything anyone would like to cover in the sort of final 10 minutes? We're very happy to keep sort of talking through these examples. I think they're really useful. It's fantastic to have everyone still on the call after 50 minutes on a Monday, but the support is there in terms of the university. We've got IT services, as we said. CI are very happy to run workshops and look at these issues with you, or look at your use if you'd like to implement pilot projects or try it out. We can do that and evaluate them. Gary, you've used it extensively in the English Language Centre, building GPTs and similar, haven't you?
Yeah, we've used a lot of it, some for staff, some for students. We had some success this summer using GPT to help students find appropriate phrases to use in seminar discussions. So it wasn't giving them any content, but it's just helping them with all the sort of talk moves that they could use to feel a little more confident in seminar discussions. That was very useful.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And just to give you an idea of some of the ethical considerations, which are profound within this technology. So there's this table here, which we'll share again. It's the idea that data that's been used to create this has not been granted permission for use by. There's bias issues, sustainability issues. We've touched on many of these, but it's something to really look into when you consider this and explore with your students as well. So we're trying to encourage a transparent use of AI throughout the Russell Group. That's the part of their principles, and it guides how it can be used. But I recommend this session at 11 o'clock, Wednesday 11, 2 o'clock with Sam, to really delve into those if you have concerns with it. And it's something that we really like students to understand as well in their own use of it, because they will be going into the career-led world to use tools like this, and perhaps haven't considered that throughout their studies as well. So we're learning from them and they're learning from us. And then really, I think we've got sort of 10 more minutes now to pick up any direct concerns or direct issues if people would like to request something in particular. So if you want to pop something in the chat, please do so. Regina, you're only replying to me at the minute. I don't know if you know that, but it's because we had a message to each other earlier. So I've been doing the same to you, posting what I thought was to everyone in the group, and it's just going to me. So you have to put everyone on the chat function. But
apologies. Yep.
No apologies needed. We've been having a two-way conversation here, and I thought, yeah, it's great. But you're an excellent colleague for discussing this. Do you want to summarize that last point you made to me, if that's okay?
Oh gosh, which of the last ones? I did one point about HR or recruitment companies using AI to sift through applications in order to see which applications match or are better aligned to the original job ad and person spec, and hence the irony that now they are annoyed that students use that as well. So that's one point. And earlier I made a point about the use of AI for marking, and given that 20 years ago already at Loughborough, MCQ or tests or face tests as they are known here have been marked through optical recognition. I think it's not such a big step to envisage that other marking will also be done by AI, and given the pressure on productivity of staff, whether it is giving less time for marking to staff, or with the sector being under huge financial pressure and universities unloading staff as well, I can see AI also being at least proposed as a help, if not a time substitution for marking. I'm trying to phrase these comments in a non-judgmental way and not go off tangent about what I think about that. But I think we need to be realistic about the evolution and developments in this area. And I also welcome them to a certain point, but I need to know what is going to be part of the policy at Liverpool and what not, and what tools can we use and which not.
Yeah, and I think that use case question has come up from Maria as well. You know, are students aware of the technologies available to them? I think that's where our role comes in as tutors, as teachers, as academics, as support teams, to talk them through the benefits of each one, where we do know those, and try and point them in the right direction of the tools that perhaps will be best served by them. And the library are doing a really great job on that through the know-how offerings. They've got standalone Canvas courses. What we'll do is we'll compile all of that information together, put it onto that Padlet, which will act as a sort of, you know, signposting source, so that hopefully after this week, you can refer back to that. And if you're in doubt with your students or with your colleagues, you're the first point of call, and then you can point them towards CIE, point them towards IT, and we will then try and work with you to help them. But getting students onto these platforms, reducing that digital divide of those that perhaps have the premium ones so they can access them through their own money. You know, we don't want that. We want to reduce this digital divide, give them the institutional access through Copilot, and make sure that they're not disadvantaged further by not knowing about this. So that's probably our priority for the upcoming year, alongside other things, isn't it, Gary?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And just trying to gradually deal with the challenges of these things getting better and better, I think. Although there is a lot less new training data out there, so we might find the pace of change does slow down a little in the next year or so.
Yeah, just Regina, just before I come to you, if that's okay, Moira's asked if students use AI, are they required to reference it? That will depend on the assessment brief in the local policy. So if they're in one department that has requested that, then they will need to do so. And that is not a centrally set position. That can be sort of, we'll talk about that later in the policy discussions, but we're finding that there's different levels of referencing and citation, and the library provide good information on how to do that through their web pages as well. How to, if you have used AI and you've used it with permission, how to reference it and cite it. Sometimes you're asked to include your prompt or your output and copy that. Sometimes you're just asked to talk about how you've done it and form a sort of declaration of it. Regina, we've got time for a few more minutes, so please fire away.
Yes, I've heard that there's a lot of talk, and also written in that email by Gavin Brown or mid-July, about the support of staff and students regarding the academic misuse of AI, and that there will be training opportunities, etc. But I think the focus and the time is still too little. The focus is still on the misuse rather than what we see today, and probably also in a couple of other sessions throughout the week, on the benefits and also a discipline-specific tools of AI, like entrepreneurship related or creative arts related, or like even fine painting related tools, which our students will need to be able to work with and are expected to work with once they graduate, to be employable. However, if we don't get the time allocated as educators to also familiarize ourselves with these tools, and time and money to go to the conferences where they discuss internationally the best practice, I find it really, really difficult, because as much as I've signed up this week for an hour here and an hour there, it's maybe 10 hours to have a general overview, but that doesn't make me confident as an expert in my discipline, about discipline, well, in the use of discipline-specific AI tools. So I would just recommend, and I will voice that again and again, that given the structural change that we will see in HE, that we allocate more time and CPD, and particularly for AI and for staff, whether it's educators, teachers, or researchers, and probably also professional services staff, to develop AI-related skills. We must do that in order to remain competitive.
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic point. And actually it forms the basis of the working groups around the curriculum project, in that there is a digital and AI dedicated group to that, to try and ensure that we do embed it within the curriculum design, curriculum process. Students get those skills as they start and graduate, and give everyone that opportunity.
Skills. Staff need that. Staff need the time. That's what I'm saying. Students, yes, of course, students need that. But I mean, when we see how we've taught over the last 20 years or 30 or 40 years, it changed a bit, but the speed of change is just way higher. And we need, similar to the time of COVID, you know, move online, we need to also ring-fence some time for CPD on AI for staff. And I would just ask you at CIE to make that point as well. It is not just curriculum related content, but also the pedagogy and staffing capabilities.
No, I think that's fantastic, actually, because as we've already said, if the students are coming to us and we haven't had the time to brush up on those skills, then we're sort of denying them in the first instance as well. So that's a point I'll take straight back to CIE. We'll raise it. Our director, Professor Dave Webster, is going to do consultations with staff again, 3 of those throughout the year. Please come along to those and make those points, because actually that's where your voice will be heard. And actually we can feed that back into our workshop design and say, well, you know, people need to be on these courses, because as you've said, so much has changed in the last year and a half since this technology came about, that there's a disconnect between what we can do as a department in CIE and the university support teams and what we're budgeted or resourced to do so. So we will take that back. There's one more question that we'll try and pick up with the last minute, and that is around the academics being able to instruct students not to use any AI. As far as I'm aware, that's the case in them setting the assessment. They can say this will be AI free. And so if that is the case, is it unfair when they are penalised and students on other modules are permitted to use it? I don't know, Gary, do you want to pick that one up?
That's difficult. I think it is a case-by-case thing. I suppose there are some assessments, especially things like computer science now, where the point of the assessment is almost entirely negated if students are allowed to use AI, because it can produce the code for them almost perfectly. So I suppose it still has to be case by case.
So for that one, I would recommend coming along to the assessment session, which is, there's one tomorrow about understanding assessment briefs, but actually there's an assessment dedicated session on Thursday at 2, assessment redesign in an age of AI. Sam will love that question. We'll give it to him right at the beginning, just to warm him up. And yes, we'd love to invite you for that. So time is out, but thank you very much for everyone for joining this afternoon. The slides and the recording will go up onto the Padlet. More sessions are tomorrow, so please come along and join us if you can. And we'll continue this conversation throughout the week, and especially that time issue of, you know, it's all well and good telling people what they need to know and how they need to know it, but if we don't allocate resources to that, it's not very fair. So thank you for that, Regina, and wishing everyone a good, happy afternoon and the last few hours of the day. Thanks for joining us.